Alright, this is John Cola with OKRaw.com. Today we have another exciting episode for you. In this episode, we're going to go ahead and compare two food processing techniques. One, of course, is used in raw food preparation, which I did do for many years. And nowadays, I use another food preparation technique called steaming, which in my personal opinion, I would personally rather eat steamed food than dehydrated food. I have heard some of my raw food friends say they got to keep it raw and they'd rather eat dehydrated stuff than steamed stuff. That being said, the other thing I will say is that dehydrated food is not optimal. It's best to eat things fresh. You know, that being said, dehydration is used as a crutch for many people to kind of step into eating more raw foods, and I would highly make the argument that it might be better just to eat more steamed vegetables instead of even dehydrated vegetables to, you know, eat healthier instead of just trying to maintain this raw label. Anyways, in this episode, I'm going to share my thoughts on dehydration versus steaming, as well as, of course, published studies, because published studies, you know, will play partly in how I choose to live my life. And I, of course, make these videos for you guys to share with you guys my thoughts, my information that literally you guys aren't going to hear anywhere else. So if you guys appreciate my content, before I forget, thumbs this video up. Also, be sure to click that subscribe button right down below and click the little bell so you get notified as my new videos come out. I am, in my opinion, what I call a divergent thinker and think of it differently than many people in our plant-based raw food eating style program. And I will have content that may blow your mind because you're really not going to hear it anywhere else. And I want you guys to benefit from all my knowledge, research, experience when you guys subscribe and watch my videos. So thank you so much. Anyways, on with this episode. All right, so as you guys can see, we got dehydration versus steaming. So we got an Excalibur dehydrator here, you know, and I'm in much more favor of dehydrating vegetables or fruity vegetables than sweet fruits these days. Personally, you know, in my opinion, we should just eat our fruits, our sweet fruits whole, or just vacuum blend them for the best way to eat them. We should not, you know, try to remove water content to make the dried fruit even sweeter and all this kind of stuff, or even juice fruits. I'm not a big fan of juicing fruits either. That being said, I don't recommend steaming your, you know, sweet fruits. That'd be insanity. Although I do, however, on occasion, steam things like peppers and tomatoes. But mostly I steam vegetables that I would not otherwise eat raw, or can significantly increase the quantities I could eat them. So for example, I have lots of mustard greens growing in my garden. I've been harvesting mustard greens for the last like 4 months. This is the last of them. Harvested a bunch last night, and mustard greens are quite hot. You could eat them raw. They'd probably burn the heck out of your mouth. Probably be really good for you that way. That being said, I do steam them for just actually 5 minutes yesterday. Sometimes I'll put them in for 3, but I had mushrooms in there. But generally I'll steam them with other things like, you know, purple sweet potatoes or purple potatoes. I steamed it with mushrooms yesterday. Also, like, I did cauliflower rice just to kind of make things interesting and give me some diversity. Also, I put in some butternut squash in there as well. And of course I steamed tempeh in there as well. Cut up tempeh into little pieces. And then I just made a little dressing, like an Asian dressing with it. So I'm a big advocate of steaming. That being said, I didn't use a steamer like I'm showing in the picture. I personally use a pressure cooker, which I believe is steaming to the next level. You could debate pressure cooking versus steaming. They're very close, very similar. Pros and cons of each, of course. I recommend you guys do either. I like pressure cooking because it's easy and my stove's still disconnected as a raw vegan, you know. And if you guys want to learn more about what I think about labels, like the raw vegan label, link down below to my video where I discuss labels, because I was recently called not a raw vegan by another raw vegan friend of mine. And he's like, John's just a vegan. He shouldn't even say raw, because if you're not 100% raw, you're not raw at all. So, you know, my opinion is that I want to have an inclusive definition in life and not an exclusive. I believe people that are more exclusive and try to exclude people are maybe on some levels being elitist, and some levels maybe feel insecure about what they're doing. I just personally feel that we should try to be inclusive in what we're doing. Anyways, let's go on with this episode, dehydration versus steaming. All right, so here is the next slide. This is a table that I made up that you may want to screenshot and save, because it kind of gives some of the rundown and the basics of my thoughts on dehydration or dehydrating your food versus steaming your food. All right, so first thing is dehydrated or steamed food still considered raw? Once again, if you want to maintain your raw food label, yes, if you dehydrate food below the magic temperature of 118, you could still consider it raw. But if it's above 118, it's cooked. You know, that being said, if you guys are buying like nuts or dried fruits or kale chips in the store, you know, let's be honest, those are not dehydrated at under 118. Or if you're buying any spices or seasonings, those are not dehydrated at under 118. Industry does not give a crap about keeping the food raw. They're going to do what's going to be best for them, and usually that means dehydrating it at a hotter temperature, which could be beneficial in my opinion. In some cases, probably not so much, because it's going to take them less time, save them more money, and, you know, being able to keep their product quality even higher. So yes, so dehydrated food could be still considered raw. Of course, steamed food, it's not raw, it's heat processed, so it's bad. So, you know, here's the thing, like, I really want to discourage you guys from classifying foods as bad or good. I would always say there is a continuum. You know, foods could be on a range on the continuum from, you know, hey, healthier for you or less healthy for you. It's never just right or wrong, good or bad. All right. Another quality is dehydrated or steamed food considered a whole food? And I would say yes. I mean, even though dehydrated food, what do you lose? You lose basically the water content and some of the nutrients in the food when you're dehydrating. Yes, you lose nutrients even if it's done at a low temperature, as I will show in the studies. And steamed foods, what are you losing? Well, you actually, you keep the whole food. You actually hydrate it maybe even potentially a little bit more. That being said, you do lose all the enzymes, but nonetheless, we are still considering these both minimally processed and whole foods. This is something paramount to my belief system, is that we want to minimally process the foods as least as possible, you know, to retain the most food benefit, health benefit in the food for us. The more you process the food, the worse it is. And that's one of the tenets of raw foods, is to keep it raw or to minimally process it to have the most nutrition, and because it's raw, it's better. Now, I don't know that I necessarily would agree with that statement wholly and completely these days, but I will say that we need to minimally process our food, and I will say that there's ways you could process food and keep it raw, because raw only has to do with the temperature and still oxidize the heck out of the food and lose significant food value, as in dehydration and even traditional blending, where you're blending in significant amounts of oxygen in the food. This is where I take raw foods and foods in general, where no other even plant-based doctors or raw vegans that I know of discuss about looking at the science and how can we process foods the most effective ways possible to keep the components of the food that I deem or you deem most important to our health, right? Nobody really talks about this, and I'm the weird one out, whatever. All right, so is dehydrated food water rich? No, it's going to dehydrate you, man. And I mean, if you guys know, I'm a big fan of staying hydrated through foods. I drink a lot of fresh juices, raw, of course, sometimes heat processed when I travel. And of course, the steamed food, is it water rich? Yes, in some cases, steamed food could even have a higher water percentage than just the raw food alone, because it actually super hydrates the food with steam and hydrates it. All right, next up is dehydrated food. What does it do with the enzymes? So it can keep the enzymes if the dehydration process is below a certain temperature. And the temperature depends on the specific enzyme, but it's always said that 118 is the magic number. And here's the thing, guys, 118 is not the magic number. Food enzymes, depending on the different enzymes, can degrade at different temperatures, sometimes up to even 140 degrees, which could be a good, or actually also a bad thing. Yes, enzymes can be good or bad. And of course, steamed foods, not going to keep the enzymes. Oh, another thing I didn't add in here is, you know, which one can be used for food sanitation, right? So it's like, say you have E. coli contamination on your food. If you dehydrate E. coli, is it going to basically sanitize your food? And I'm going to say no. But if you steam your food, steaming can kill certain bacteria, and that's why they recommend cooking certain foods to kill the bacteria, right? That's another important point that I didn't discuss on here. Anyways, next up we got polyphenols, and if you guys watch me a lot, you guys know that polyphenols are a component of foods. It's, you know, what actually is making my purple beet leaf here purple. It's the polyphenols, specifically in the purple beet leaves, it's probably the betalains. But in other plants could be the anthocyanins and other things. Anyways, in dehydration, you could get a great loss of the polyphenols. And especially if it's done at a low temperature that I'll show in the studies proven by science. Because if you're keeping the enzymes active, the enzymes, such as polyphenol oxidase, could break down the polyphenols and lower them. Meanwhile, when you steam your food, you get a small loss of polyphenols, because what happens is when you steam food, it kills all the enzymes, which once again, in this case, the enzymes, they could create, you know, good nutrients, but also enzymes could actually break down nutrients and make them less. So in this case, because we're basically killing the enzymes, it stops the enzymatic degradation of some of the polyphenols in the foods. So there's a smaller loss of polyphenols. So I guess it comes down to enzymes and polyphenols. What do you want to maximize for? Do you want to maximize for enzymes because you believe they're good, right? Then you want to dehydrate food instead of steam your food. But if you believe polyphenols are good, which there's a lot of science out there, guys and girls, that polyphenols are good, then you want to steam your food because there's a much smaller loss, as I'll show in a study. And then what's the processing temperature? So dehydration, in raw food context anyways, you do want to do it low, between 105 to 118 degrees. That being said, dehydration in commercial trade could go up to 140, 160, maybe even a little bit hotter. And then of course, steam food is basically a medium heat, very important. I do not advocate for high heat cooking. Link down below for my video where I give the heat process food continuum on, you know, minimal ways to heat process food, which in my opinion are better, and, you know, high heat ways that are actually toxic and bad. So once again, everything's not always good or bad, right or wrong. It really kind of just depends on the specific process. So nuance. Next up, can dehydrated food be used for food storage? Yes, for long term. Some dehydrated foods can be kept for 6 months, even a year, if stored properly. That being said, steam foods, because it does contain the water and it is hydrated, bacteria will end up growing on it. So that steam food is good for short-term storage. So for example, I steamed like 5 quarts of vegetables last night, including the mushrooms. And I ate about 1 quart, and I basically put up 3 quarts and stored them in a mason jar under vacuum. I put in my fridge that's cold, and that'll easily store a week. You know, that's going to store a lot, you know, better than, you know, fresh vegetables, as they would degrade. And then food texture. What happens to the texture when you dehydrate food? Of course, we've all dehydrated kale chips or, you know, fruit. It gets hard and chewy, right? So it's still hard, whereas steamed vegetables or steamed foods are soft. So they're a lot more palatable, easier to eat, especially, you know, if you have some issues with, you know, teeth loss or, you know, chewing and all these things. And then this is an interesting point here that many people never cover. What happens to the cell walls when you dehydrate? I mean, in general, I mean, there's many things that happen to them, but they tend to collapse. The pectin tends to collapse, and it tends to get really hard. That's why dehydrated food is like really hard and chewy, and it's just not fluffy. And, you know, especially on fruits, it's like the worst. I mean, well, maybe with kale, it's not as bad because the cell walls are a little bit different. But when you steam food, you know, say if you try to dehydrate sweet potato, like a chunk of sweet potato, right? It's just completely hard because the cell walls have collapsed. But if you steam sweet potato, and I only recommend steaming purple sweet potato because it has less sugar and also has the polyphenols, it tends to dissolve and gets really soft. So this is the way the cell walls are now broken open, and now more nutrition is available for you. So, you know, here's the thing. There's pros and cons of each method. Is one better than the other? Well, it really depends on your criteria and what is important to you. Of course, if you have dentures and you can't chew hard foods, then steamed foods is great, right? If you want to store food for longer term storage, then dehydration is better than steamed food. That being said, I don't even recommend dehydration these days. I recommend freeze drying. Link down below to my video, my Stay Fresh freeze dryer episode, where I visit the factory and share with you guys some of the published studies on dehydrated versus freeze dried that we'll also be discussing in one of these studies coming up right now. All right, so, I'd comb the science trying to find basically studies showing comparisons between dehydration and steaming. Unfortunately, the science is lacking in this department, because other than a raw vegan, I don't know who would want to, basically compare steaming to dehydration, because normally they're thought as different kind of, food preparation techniques. They always compare steaming with boiling and baking and microwaving and all these other things, and dehydration usually they compare just in food preservation to kind of, keep industries, foods, stable so that they could sell them and make a profit. I was able to find a few studies where we kind of discuss this loosely, so let's get into them and show you guys the science on why I do the things I do, and more importantly, reveal to you the truth about dehydration, that it's not all that it's cracked out to be. It's like, oh, because dehydration keeps things raw, it's automatically better, and I would say that's totally not necessarily true. Anyways, this first study is an overview of health-promoting compounds of broccoli, Brassica olivifera, var. Italica, and the effects of processing. So we'll read off some of the highlighted parts. Broccoli offers many health-promoting properties owing to its content of antioxidant and anti-carcinogenic compounds. The concentration and bioavailability of polyphenols, glucosinolates, sulforaphane, and selenium depend on plant biochemistry, cultivation strategy, and type of processing. My comment is that we should be eating all different kinds of brassica family plants, including broccoli, cabbages, kales, collard greens, bok choys, mustard greens. They are literally the bomb. Even arugula, even moringa is an honorary brassica family plant because it has things like the glucosinolates in there, even things like the nasturtiums. Link down below to my video on Indian cress and why you should grow nasturtiums. Actually, I have them right behind me if you guys could see the nasturtium flowers and these amazing nasturtium leaves. Also rich in the glucosinolates, these nice little leaves. They look like little lily pads. Nice, hot, spicy flavor. I love them. Oh my gosh, it brings a nice smile to my face. The sulforaphane as I chew it up in my mouth. Anyways, there's lots of health benefits to these different properties of the brassica family plants, and I think that is quite sad that some camps of raw foodists actually exclude brassica family plants. They just eat tender lettuce, don't eat any brassicas, they're toxic. That's insanity, but whatever. All right, so continuing on to the study. Steaming and drying result in an apparent increment of sulforaphane content as well as antioxidant activity, most likely due to an increase in the extractability of antioxidants and sulforaphane. Freezing and boiling diminish polyphenol concentration, mainly due to volatilization and leaching into the cooking water. In view of these results, the optimization of broccoli processing in order to maximize the content of bioactive compounds should be possible. All right, so what are they saying here? Actually, they're saying that steaming and drying is an increase in sulforaphane content and antioxidant activity. So they're actually almost lumping them in the same category in the abstract, but we're going to get into the science to see really the truth. And of course, they're talking, not so good about the freezing and boiling of the foods. And this is the other thing. People think, oh, if you eat it raw, it's always going to be best. And yes, in many cases, it could be the best. But some cases, processing your food, breaking open cell walls can provide additional or even different benefits than eating the food raw alone. This is something that I look at and see in the science so much, is that there's always nuance. So you shouldn't only ever eat your broccoli raw. You should sometimes steam it, maybe sometimes dehydrate it, or actually better yet than dehydration is freeze drying, which I do to my broccoli, which just makes it absolutely incredible. Vacuum blend it, juice it, they could all have different benefits. But you know what most people don't talk about is the specific processing technique to maximize your health benefit, right? So let's go down in the study and see what it says. All right, so this is the table I want to show with you guys. It's table 2, effective broccoli processing on its main bioactive properties. The bioactive properties are the properties that can provide us with health benefits. So you guys could see the baseline they use is raw and fresh, and you can see the total amount of polyphenols and glucosinolates, glucoraphanin, sulforaphane, and free radical scavenging activity. And then as they go down, they boil it, blanch it, steam it, microwave it, and then they have frozen raw, frozen microwaved, and then frozen boiled, and you could see the percentage of polyphenols left. So for example, if you boil the broccoli, you only have 59.3% of the total polyphenols left in the boiled. If you steam it, you have 95.6 actually of the total polyphenols. So you're losing like 4%, right? And if you microwave it, actually you increase the polyphenols. I am not an advocate of microwave food, but a lot of the studies show that many nutrients, when you microwave food, can be increased. I think that there are other consequences of microwaving your food personally, so I don't do it, and so I just steam my stuff. But look, if you have frozen raw broccoli, you're getting only 37% of the total polyphenols, so that's quite interesting. And then it looks like if you boil the frozen broccoli, it goes up to 94%, which may be because now you're breaking open more cell walls than the frozen. I'm not sure. Anyways, this is the interesting point, the tunnel air dry. Tunnel air dried is basically like dehydration, and this is in Celsius. So to convert it to Fahrenheit, 50 Celsius is 122. So if you dehydrate broccoli at 122, you're keeping only 33%, 33.8% of the total polyphenols. And let's not even discuss the glucosinolates, which are just not NA, you know, they're not even in there. So I guess they didn't test that. And then tunnel air dried at 60 C. 60 is about 140 degrees. You got 24%. And then at 75 degrees, I think that's somewhere between like maybe 160 something degrees, you lose even more at 22.8%. So if you're just looking at polyphenols, guys and girls, the steamed vegetables keeps significantly more than the air dried. So, you know, but you're like thinking, John, but if they air dried it at 105, it's going to keep more. Yeah, it's not going to keep more than 95. I'd stake my life on that. It might keep a little bit more than 33, but then again, you know, it might go down because now there's going to be more enzymatic activity that could break down some of the nutrients. And then let's go down a little bit further on the study and discuss this. All right, first we'll discuss the steaming, and it says, as a consequence, steam processed broccoli should have an enhanced antioxidant through phenols and flavonoids and anti-carcinogenic through glucosinolate properties. So they're basically recommending steaming, and you know, that's pretty consistent with a lot of the published science studies, is that, you know, if you are going to cook foods, generally steaming comes out on top. Yeah, microwaving could come out on top too, but generally steaming is thought of as a healthier way to process or heat process your foods. And this is where it's talk about some of the frozen broccoli. Furthermore, the frozen material contained up to 66% less polyphenols than the raw vegetable. So, you know, they always say, oh, frozen is good as raw. You know, definitely not with broccoli, maybe with some other foods. And this is just this one study, right? But nonetheless, 66% less polyphenols than raw vegetables, and it showed a decrease in 33% in the antioxidant activity, right, just from using frozen. It said similar results were obtained by, you know, this study who compared the antioxidant capability and total polyphenol content of fresh and frozen broccoli. They found a 58.4% decrease in polyphenol content and a 12.4% decrease in antioxidant activity. So if you have the choice between frozen broccoli or fresh broccoli, right, buy the fresh broccoli. Or I mean, even better yet, grow broccoli yourself. I still have it growing in my garden, although it's bolting at this point. So now let's go down and talk a little bit more about freezing, and then of course the drying or dehydration. It says freezing is one of the most popular and effective methods for food preservation, allowing to keep the nutritional and sensory properties of the raw materials for extensive periods of time. However, before freezing, foodstuffs are usually subjected to pre-treatments such as blanching, which affect the food properties in a major or minor way. So for example, as far as I'm aware, vegetables are always blanched before freezing so that they basically they kill the enzymes, because otherwise you get enzymatic loss on the food during the frozen process. So for example, if you freeze, I'm sure a lot of you guys have frozen bananas. You freeze bananas, you put them in, they look white, and then you take them out in 3 months and they're all black. And they're black because the enzymes, the polyphenol oxidase, is reacting, yes, even in the freezer, to the oxygen in there. If you sucked a vacuum on the bag, then that's going to happen to a much lesser extent. And you're going to basically lose nutrients due to the enzymatic activity, right? That's why they blanch the food, to keep the nutrition higher. So if you want to, once again, maintain your all raw label that you're eating any frozen vegetables, you're not raw. So raw food restaurants like Al Lak will, serve, frozen vegetables they basically buy and then, add to the recipes. Of course, if you freeze your own vegetables and then thaw them out, that can still be considered raw if the raw label is important. Anyways, let's go down to drying or dehydration. And then it says they found that 50 to 65 degrees, which is 122 to 149, drying of intact broccoli maintained the original glucosinolate content as well as myrosinase activity, right? So that could be good. So here's the thing. They show it even at 149 degrees, it's maintaining enzymatic activity. So the enzymes didn't die at even 149, according to this study. Basically blowing out of the water the 118 degree myth. Once again, it depends on the specific enzymes you're looking at. And now it says, however, glucosinolates were hydrolyzed when broccoli was subjected to rehydration. So, usually when you dehydrate things, it's going to be rehydrated, whether it's in your mouth and you're eating it, or whether you're putting the dehydrated food back into something to hydrate it to eat it again. And then moving down further on the dehydration, it said they found that temperature had a negative effect on total polyphenol content, and that the airflow rate has a positive effect on the antioxidant activity of dehydrated broccoli. So temperature has a negative effect. So the hotter the temperature, the lower the total polyphenols is what they're saying. And this is amongst other, this correlates with other studies I've seen with dehydrated fruits, for example, and checking the antioxidant content. The lower the temperature, the longer the time, the less the polyphenols. So when you're dehydrating things at a low temperature for a long time, you may be keeping enzymes, but you're lowering polyphenols. I'm not making this up. This is right there in the study. So you have to select, you have to choose what's more important to you. Are you eating your dehydrated food for enzymes? And if I think you are, if you are, I think you should get your head checked, because if you really want enzymatically rich food, grow some sprouts or microgreens, harvest them and eat them directly, right? Make some fermented foods, right? Those are teeming with enzymes, a much better enzyme source if you are dehydrating. I would encourage you guys to, move past the 118 degree block and dehydrate at warmer temperatures to preserve more of the valuable polyphenols. All right, moving down, it says the main conclusion of the authors was that high temperature, short time drying process kept the highest antioxidant activity of broccoli. And in addition, I will say that's true with other fruits and vegetables as well. So you want to do a higher temperature, shorter time versus longer temperature and lower time. And nobody else in raw foods will tell you guys this. They'll just keep with the dogma of low temperature, long time is better because you keep the enzymes, and that's what's been taught, but nobody has been looking at the science. So basically this study concludes that, you want to use the best preservation technique to preserve the most active phytonutrients that can have things like anti-cancer benefits, and they're going to recommend steaming, right, over things like drying. All right, on to the next study. This next study is interesting. They discuss the flavonoid content in fresh, home-processed, and light-exposed onions and in dehydrated commercial onion products. I was kind of more interested in the dehydrated commercial onion products because they're dehydrated, and we're going to see if there's significant amount of nutrition as compared to fresh or home-processed. So we're going to read a part of this abstract. It says, onion plants synthesize flavonoids as protection against damage by UV radiation and by intercellular hydrogen peroxide. because flavonoids also exhibit health-promoting effects in humans and need exists to measure their content in onions and in processed onion products. And then continue down. Here's some tips for you guys that are watching. Small onions had higher flavonoid content per kilogram than large ones. So if you guys are shopping and you really care about the nutrition, you could make a difference by selecting the small onions that nobody's buying, because everyone wants the big ones, because bigger is better in America, right? But nonetheless, we want to buy the small onions. I mean, that would go with many foods as well. Even like the smaller crab apples better than the large apples. Bigger is not always better. And then it says, also, there was a graduated decrease in the distribution of flavonoids across an onion bulb from the first outside to the seventh innermost scale. Right? That's another point. So what does that mean? That means that the outer rings of the onion, the outside, right, have the most polyphenols and nutrition as compared to the inside. So when you peel the onion, because you want to get rid of the outside that's all messed up, that's been exposed to the air, you're losing more nutrition. So try to just wash the outside or minimally peel. Just take the first layer off and eat all the outside layers, because that's where the onion is getting the UV from the sun or even fluorescent lighting, as they show, and has the most nutrition in there. All right. And then moving on, it says commercial dehydrated onion products contain low amounts or no flavonoids. So they're saying dehydrated onion products contain no flavonoids, right? So that's how bad dehydration can be. Now, we don't know how they processed or dehydrated their onions, but if you think like, I buy dehydrated onion products to like add to things because I'm like, oh, this adds additional nutrition, it's an easy way to get more onions in me, and you know, this study really shed some light on it that, hey, contains low or no flavonoids. Okay, maybe it's good for seasoning, but it's not good for a functional food, so it'd be best to, you know, eat the fresh onions instead of the dried ones. Hey, maybe some dried ones if you're just doing it for flavor. And of course, if you select the right dried ones or do it yourself, you could probably have a lot more nutrition. Anyways, to sum up this study, it says losses of onion flavonoids subject to cooking in percentage range as following. So of course, the worst way to cook foods in terms of flavonoids is frying, sauteing, and boiling, right? You lost the most. And of course, steaming, it had was one of the best at 14%. Microwaving, you only lost 4%. And in this case, actually, baking was 0. I do not recommend baking for other reasons. I mean, it says, this is the interesting point. So if you buy onions, it says, exposure to fluorescent light for 24 and 48 hours induce time-dependent increases in flavonoid content. So I'd say also, besides fluorescent light, just use real light. So if you buy onions, right, don't store them in your fridge. Put them outside, leave them on your counter so the light inside your house from the windowsill could hit the onions and increase the flavonoid content. I mean, you could put them outside, you know, you're going to eat them at night. You could put them outside in the daytime, get a little bit of sun. They're going to increase in nutrition content a little bit, all right? So that's some interesting, valuable takeaways. But let's go down to some of this parts of the study where they discuss the commercial onion products and the flavonoids. All right, so you guys can see they list all the different home processing techniques on the flavonoids: baking, boiling, frying, microwaving, sauteing, steaming. And you can see these are the different flavonoids. There's different kinds of quercetins and all these different things, and they measure them all, and they have the sums and all this stuff. Not really going to cover that because that's beyond the scope of this episode. But what I did want to cover is flavonoid content of dehydrated commercial onion products. And you guys could see they had all these samples A to P. And even if you look up here, all these numbers, you know, there are numbers there. Some of them are rather small, but there's all numbers there. And then when they tested the commercial onion products, all these different products, like over a dozen of them, non-detected of these different quercetin, you know, flavonoids. I mean, a few products had a little bit randomly, but then if you look at this, O is the outlier. Whoa, O actually has all the flavonoid products, and O is the outlier. O actually has all the different flavonoids, maybe except for Q7, 4, G, but it had all the other ones in actually significantly higher amounts than even like the steamed up there, which is actually quite impressive. So what's going on here? Why did most dehydrated products have non-detectable, basically none, and O had some. So let's go down and figure out what's going on here. It said the absence or very low levels of flavonoids observed with most of the products was an unexpected finding. It is probably not due to problems with the extraction analysis because product O contained 7 of the 8 substances. This onion product was freeze-dried from Spice Hunter Inc., San Luis Obispo. Freeze drying is a general process that other commercial drying processes that use heat. This might account for the difference in flavonoid content compared to similar products. So once again, showing this chart here, right? Freeze drying kicks some butt because it's a least minimal heat processing. Actually does it under vacuum, preserves more nutrition. So if you guys are buying spices or dehydrated products, buy freeze-dried instead of dehydrated. In this case, I mean, they tested over a dozen commercial products, which in most cases had undetectable amounts of flavonoids. So, you know, I'm not going to say that you dehydrate your onions at home and you have 0 detectable amounts of flavonoids. We don't know the time and the temperature that they did these products at. We also don't know the grinding or if the product was sitting out and oxidized in the bag because it was too old, and that maybe that's why the flavonoid content got lost. Who knows? But nonetheless, freeze drying definitely the best way over dehydration. And you know, always be wary when you're buying dried spices if actually you're going to get nutrients out of them, unless you basically make them yourself and you freeze dry them, which is what I do, so you know you could have the most nutrition. That being said, I'm going to have to start freeze drying onions again so I don't have to buy commercial organic onion dehydrated powders and flakes that I've been buying. All right, here's the next study, and it says the effect of thermal processing on key phytochemical compounds in green leafy vegetables. Somebody who eats raw vegan, you know, I know there's a lot of fruit-based raw vegans out there. I want to encourage you guys to eat your vegetables. I would say that if you guys eat 2 pounds of fruit a day, you should at least match it with 2 pounds of vegetables a day. You eat 4 pounds of fruit a day, eat 4 pounds of vegetables a day. This will actually keep your fruit to vegetable balance fairly good. That being said, I would encourage you to unrestrict your diet and eat more than just fruits and vegetables, including other whole food plants, you know, beans, grains, nuts, and seeds, you know, rice, seaweeds, mushrooms. All these things are simply amazing. Anyways, on with this study, and we'll read the whole abstract for you. So it says, green leafy vegetables are widely cultivated and consumed in Southeast Asia. These vegetables are rich in phytochemicals which have been associated to particular health benefits. Preparation, processing, particularly those involving heat prior to consumption, can change the level of phytochemicals in the vegetables following various mechanisms, including thermal breakdown, oxidation, leaching, matrix degradation. Appropriate processing should minimize degradation of phytochemicals so that the optimum intake towards health promotion can be achieved. Better understanding of how processing influences the retention of phytochemical compounds is therefore crucial to provide guidelines on the processing of green leafy vegetables while maintaining their nutritional values. So what does that abstract mean in layman's terms? It basically means there's lots of nutrition in leafy greens, and depending on how you process them, you can keep more of these benefits or less. You know, in case raw vegans would like to think that raw always keeps the most, that's not always true. There can be some benefits to heat processing vegetables over and above raw, or even juicing vegetables over and above just eating them whole and raw, unlike some whole food plant-based diet doctors would want you to believe. So, you know, here's the thing. I'm in favor of processing in the least methods to create the least amount of toxins, to make more of the beneficial compounds available to us. And I understand that each method has its own sets of pros and cons, and we should do multiple methods, you know, for the best health outcomes. Because, you know, there's not only ever one method that will be best in all cases. So raw is not always best. Sometimes juicing kale can be better than eating it raw, but hey, sometimes, depending on the nutrient or phytochemical you're looking at, steaming it could be even better than eating it raw, especially when you could steam greens and eat a lot more higher quantity of them than you could eat simply raw. Anyways, on with this study. which is basically an overview of the different kinds of nutrients, so polyphenols, and they talk about carotenoids. You can read the study. All these studies are linked down below in the description. Ascorbic acid, they discuss how, it reacts during different cooking processes, glucosinolates, and they discuss different processes. This is for like you guys that really want to go deep in this stuff. I'm not going to go super hardcore, blanching, boiling, and they have all the studies to show the different polyphenols and losses and whatnot. But I really just want to kind of key in this case, to the dehydration. They talk about steaming, or the drying, because the drying is really in my opinion, least understood. They have lots of published studies on steaming and boiling and all these things, but there's less studies on drying and specifically how that relates to the food quality. So the default message is that, dehydration is always better than cooking something, which many raw vegans may believe, which is something I no longer believe. So anyways, in this case, they talk about drying, and I'm going to read significant portions of this study. It says, drying is often applied to increase shelf life by preventing microbial growth and enzymatic reaction through reduction of water content and water activity. So I would say reduces microbial growth by removing the water content, which I discussed earlier, so you could have longer storage. But then also in context of commercial drying, they want to remove the enzymatic reaction. So they're doing this at high temperature because they know that if you keep the enzymes, you lose more phytonutrients and nutrients, and also you lose a storability effect. So if you are dehydrating things at a low temperature for a longer time, you guys don't want to store them for a long time. You want to eat them sooner rather than later, because if there is enzyme activity in your dehydrated foods, right, those enzymes will react with the nutrients and degrade the food more quickly over time, such as the frozen bananas in your freezer, they still turn brown. Okay, so if you dehydrate your own foods at low temperature a long time, eat them within the next week or several weeks. Don't just store them for a year. Okay, and it says various drying methods are commonly applied to green leaf vegetables, such as shade drying, sun drying, oven drying, cabinet drying, and freeze drying. And people think, shade drying is the best because it's in the shade and it's a natural process. And let's discuss this. So it says, during shade drying, significant reductions of ascorbic acid in drumstick leaves, which are moringa leaves, papaya leaves, and spinach was reported. To a lesser degree, shade drying also reduced the availability of carotenoid and flavonoid content. During shade drying, despite carried out at relatively low temperatures, so this could maybe be considered raw, long drying times, 1 to 3 weeks, significantly decrease phytochemical content in vegetables. Shorter drying time during oven drying and the absence of thermal load during freeze drying ensured a lower degree of thermally induced degradation of heat-sensitive chlorophylls. So what are they saying to sum it up? Basically, they're saying if you dehydrate for a lower temperature for a longer time, in this case, it's significantly longer, you get significantly decreased phytochemical content in vegetables, right? This proves my point that I've also seen in the science that, low temperature dehydration is not the best way to preserve phytochemicals. If you believe the phytochemicals are important to you, which I believe they're some of the most important properties in the food myself. That being said, we could have a difference of opinion, and it's all right to think differently than me because I'm probably a bit whack. All right, let's go down further. Now, if you think sun drying is good, so you could buy sun-dried figs, for example, and it says sun drying has been reported to decrease phytochemical compounds, phenolic, flavonoid, carotenoid, ascorbic acid, and chlorophyll in green leafy vegetables ranging from 35% to 100%, which is insane. That's 100% of the phytochemical content because it's sun-dried. So, we might think, sun-dried is natural, it's good, and, there's significant decreases depending on the food that is being sun-dried. Anyways, this study reported a 63% decrease in carotenoid content in drumstick leaves or moringa leaves upon sun-drying, which is more severe than of steaming, freezing, and sterilization. So what are they saying? They're saying that basically if you took moringa leaves, you steamed them, you would have more carotenoid content if you steamed them than you dehydrated them, right? And people think, dehydration is good, steaming is bad, right? Once again, depends on the specific nutrient you are considering and looking at. In the case of flavonoids, they get tanked in dehydration. And then here's another one. Oven drying is another, drying technique. After oven drying, most of the polyphenol compounds, phenolonic, flavonoid, carotenoid, chlorophyll, and ascorbic acid in green leafy vegetables decrease between 4% and 100%. And this study reported that cabinet drying of drumstick leaves, once again moringa leaves, decreased total polyphenol, carotenoid, chlorophyll, and ascorbic acid. Cabinet tray drying was also reported to decrease total polyphenols and flavonoids in spinach and in coriander leaves. So cabinet drying is like more traditional dehydrator we would have at home. And then going down a little bit further, they talk about specific temperature. So drying at 60 degrees Celsius, which is 140 degrees, decreased flavonoid content in Kenneker, Cosmos caludus, I'll have to look that one up, leaves because of the increase of flavonoid degradation enzyme activity, such as the polyphenol oxidase enzyme. So, here's the thing. Even at 140 degrees, right, there was flavonoid degrading enzyme activity, showing that even at 140, enzymes can still be alive. So, this once again blows up the myth of 118 keeps all the enzymes. 140 in this particular case, keeps the enzymes as well, right? But as you see, you get massive flavonoid degradation and loss. And it says, however, the enzyme activity could be reduced by drying at temperatures higher than 70. So here's the thing, at 70, at 158, the enzyme activity was nixed, but at 140, it was not. So maybe we want to raise our dehydration temperatures to 160 to kill the enzymes, but we keep the polyphenols instead of 140, Something interesting to think about. Anyways, it says the content of phytochemical compounds in vegetables can also have further losses during storage. So once again, if you do dehydrate your food, eat it as soon as possible. Also, don't let it, be exposed to air. Store it in a Mylar bag with the oxygen removed with an oxygen absorber. That's how I store my freeze-dried foods. That being said, even then, dehydrated food shouldn't be stored significantly long. And even worse, grinding could increase the surface area of the dried product that leads to further losses through auto-oxidation. Therefore, dried or powdered vegetables must be protected from air and light. So yes, if you buy spices or herbs or dried spinach or kale powders, they should be packed in dark bottles or, non-see-through bottles, protected from air, so oxygen absorber in there. You pull a vacuum on it and light. If you do, like I dehydrate my moringa leaves, when you dehydrate the leaves, you should leave the leaves whole and not ground up. I know we want to grind them up because it takes less space, it looks cooler, but you want to keep them whole until you're ready to use them. So keep them whole, store them in a Mylar bag with an oxygen, absorber, suck the air out, and then when you're ready to use them, then take them out and grind them and then use them, right? All these little processes can make a difference in nutrition. Now, you may think I'm whack for even going this deep because most people don't give a crap. They just go and eat McDonald's and could give a shit less. But, here's the thing. This is my journey. This is my 29th year of being what I would consider a raw vegan because I eat more than 75% of my diet raw still. And I've been trying to improve. And this is where my journey takes me to try to improve and dial it in a little bit further so that hopefully my kids one day, that I want to have kids, luckily, when I find a partner, I could teach them these things so like we could optimize their diet because I believe this is all important. And maybe some of you guys that are still watching do also. Anyways, let's go down to this last paragraph on the drying part. Now it says, compared to other drying methods, freeze drying remained the best to retain translutein, transluthoxanthin, trans-B carotene, total carotenoid A, trichlorophosphol, ascorbic acid, chlorophyll A, and chlorophyll B, increases of total phenolic contents in papaya leaves and chlorophyll and ascorbic acid in water spinach. I grow water spinach, has also been reported. It is believed that the use of low temperature during freeze drying prevents thermal degradation of these heat-sensitive compounds. Furthermore, the formation of ice crystals can rupture cell walls, thus allowing the release of cellular components, which consequently improves extractability. So what are they saying there? I mean, a few things. They're saying unknowingly that dehydration at low temperatures is not good enough. and that you need the ultra low temperatures of the freeze drying, plus it is done under a vacuum, so in an oxygen deprived environment, and freezing that blows open cell walls without using significant amounts of heat. You know, so if you guys still are using the dehydrator thinking you're doing good, right, you guys could do better. I would say invest in a freeze dryer that takes your food to the next level. Freeze dried is the next level of dehydration. I really don't recommend dehydration. I would recommend actually freeze drying for long-term food preservation. I'm a big fan of freeze drying, as proven by this study, as proven by other studies. It actually maximizes nutrition. It's really one of the best ways to process your food so that you could store it. Makes it nice and crunchy, doesn't collapse the texture. It kind of keeps it nice and fluffy, and things taste amazing when they're freeze dried. Yeah, it's just amazing. So if you guys want to learn more about freeze dryers, link down below in my video. I will say that the machines are quite expensive, but it's a one-time investment, and it could possibly take your health to the next level if you still eat lots of dehydrated foods. That being said, I mean, I think the better thing to do, honestly, is just buy an Instant Pot, and instead of dehydrating so many foods, just start, you know, heat processing them in the Instant Pot and steaming them. As you guys saw in some of these published studies, you're going to get more levels of the polyphenols. So what I'll say as a summary of this episode is that I'll say if you still dehydrate food, right, and you eat a lot of it, then it'd be better to invest in a freeze dryer so you could kind of maintain your raw label if that is important to you. That being said, if your raw label is not important to you and health and polyphenols is more important to you, like it is to me, right, then I would say invest in something like an Instant Pot that makes steaming your food really easy, really convenient, so you guys could get more vegetables in you. That's one of the journeys that I've been on my raw vegan journey. You know, I eat a lot more vegetables now that I heat process my vegetables, because now I could, instead of eating fruit for my calories, which I still eat plenty of fruit, had my mesa pote yesterday, had amazing jackfruit the other day, been having lots of organic tangerines lately, bunch of mangoes. You know, I had actually a bunch of strawberries today and organic blackberries yesterday. Eat tons of fruit, but you know, now I'm able to eat more vegetables and eat a little bit less fruit, and that has really worked out, in my opinion, for my health benefit, according to my latest blood tests and also microbiome diversity. All right, and then we got one study just to kind of gloss over, which I really want to just kind of talk about real quick, and that was this. This has really nothing to do with dehydration versus cooking, but I thought it was interesting, and I thought I'd throw it in there. And it says a comparison of steaming and boiling root vegetables for enhancing carbohydrate content and sensory profile. Some of you guys may not understand why this is that important, but basically the carbohydrate content and sensory profile in my opinion has to do with like how good is it when you taste it. So like eating a raw sweet potato, for example, the sensory profile is not good, it's really chalky and hard. But when you steam it, you know, or most people bake it, which I do not recommend, the sensory profile now is nice and soft and creamy and tasty and delicious. But the other part of it is enhancing carbohydrate content. And for those of you guys, why this is important is because, you know, the carbohydrate content, especially of root vegetables, you know, not just feed us, but more importantly, feed our microbiome. So that's why I found this study interesting. And I just want to go into this real quick because this compares thermally treated versus raw. And I'll read this one sentence of the abstract. Thermally treated Jerusalem artichokes and parsnips showed higher content of cell wall polysaccharides, particularly beta-glucans, e.g. cellulose, and pectic compounds compared to raw. So you just to think that if I eat it raw, it's always better. Once again, every method you process food can result in different end products and different benefits. So in this case, you know, heat processing Jerusalem artichokes, you could get more beta-glucans, and, you know, they make beta-glucan supplements because there's benefits to eating beta-glucans. Beta-glucans also found in things like oats and mushrooms, of course. But yeah, that's interesting to find that Jerusalem artichokes, when heat processed, now you get more beta-glucan content, better carbohydrate content, which, of course, can be probably more beneficial to your microbiome and overall health. All right, so that's it for today's episode where I compare the steamed versus dehydrated food. I know it was long. I'm not going to say it wasn't. And, you know, I took you kind of through my journey, some of my thought process and my ideas about dehydrated versus steamed foods. And, you know, why these days I'd much rather eat steamed foods instead of dehydrated foods, especially because a lot of dehydrated foods, especially they're like sweet treats, which in my opinion are not as healthy as like steamed greens. But nonetheless, I want to know your thoughts. What did you think, right? Did you watch all this? If you did, hey, thumbs this video up. Also, what do you think? Are you still going to eat your dehydrated food because you think that's the best? It's better than steamed because if it's cooked, it's bad and all cooked food is bad? Or maybe did I open you up a little bit, plant a seed in there somewheres and get you to start thinking about, hey, the polyphenols and all these plant chemicals that John talked about are rather important for our health, and maybe we can increase them by minimally heat processing our food to get more of these beneficial compounds in us. Maybe you think all the science is full of BS. I want to know your comments down below. Whatever you guys think, whatever your comments are, whatever your experiences are. Maybe you were eating high fruit and then you started eating some steamed vegetables because of me or not, and man, your health improved, or you started feeling better, right? Raw is not law, and while raw food diet for periods of time can have significant amounts of benefits, I do believe that there can be benefits to selectively processing, different foods through certain methods, to retain the most nutrition and most specific, more specifically certain plant compounds that can more benefit your health as well as your microbiome health. Because to remind you guys that a lot of the polyphenols that we consume, we actually don't absorb. Our microbiome will, and that'll actually influence our gut microbiome, which will also influence our health in the long run. Last thing I'd like to say is, once again, thumbs this video up if you haven't already. And also, please, guys and girls, share this video with other people that maybe are stuck in a raw food, raw vegan, dehydration dogma mindset, to maybe try to open them up about some of the benefits of steaming your greens to make them more bioavailable, increase some of the polyphenol content over dehydration so they can get health benefits as well. If you like this content, be sure to click that subscribe button right down below so you don't miss out on my new and upcoming episodes. I come in every 5 to 7 days. You never know where I'll show up or what you'll be learning on my YouTube channel. Make sure you click the bell so you get notified as the video is content. Finally, be sure to check my past episodes. Past episodes are a wealth of knowledge. Over 700 episodes at this time on this channel dedicated to teach you guys all about how to eat a whole food, plant-based, raw diet as healthy as possible. I'll also put links down below to some of the videos I made in the past where I discuss eating more heat processed foods on a raw vegan diet, so you guys could learn more about it if you guys are interested. So with that, my name is John Kohler with OKRaw.com. We'll see you next time, and until then, remember, keep eating your fresh fruits and vegetables. They're always the best.